My dream deals with a warehouse. It is multiple levels and is made of wood. It resembled a kind of manufacturer warehouse from the 1950s because it wasn't set up for safety as we see today. Originally, I believed it was the attic of our old house in College Park, but as I looked around and started exploring, I realized this isn't any kind of attic for the size of it. The reason I felt it was our old home was that there was a set of stairs that you could go up into the area above our house, but the ceiling was gone, so that's when I knew this wasn't our house. Another thing was that there were different levels with wooden stairs that made you believe it possibly could have been a barn, but it was too big to be a barn. At different times, the scene would change to another area at ground level, and it was like this basement section was made of concrete. My impression of this was a possible hiding place for those who were trying to escape a kind of statewide prison. In other words, everyone was being subjugated to the government and there was no place to get away from it. The dimensions of this warehouse was like maybe a half-mile in any direction. It wasn't well lit either, and I didn't see any kind of windows. I would think it could have had a belfry because there are 2x4 crossbeams over each section, and anything could have been up there because you couldn't see anything for the poor lighting conditions. I had this dream maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and just now I am remembering it. Places like this in my dreams make me feel creepy, like there was something else about the meaning that I didn't get. I still don't get it even now, but if I remember dreams, I am starting to write them down because maybe the Lord Jesus wants me to share them. Sometimes in this dream I would be in sections that were definitely maintenance areas because they had chain-linked fences around the machinery. One thing I remember is a chain-linked fence around an apparent barren area for something, but I don't remember. It was like maybe a perimeter between sections and they didn't want you to go beyond it maybe. Most areas wherever you could walk were open, and the stalls next to the walkways would permit you to look and see what was there, but I normally didn't notice. Beyond it being a warehouse made me think more of it being a kind of what the Bible described as the ark, where Noah placed animals and saved what life could be saved when the flood occurred. There are always different connotations that made you have different opinions about one dream. I still believe that it was a warehouse of some kind, but the biggest impression I have is that you were hiding there from something. This makes me remember another dream of a similar subject. I presently work for a thrift store, and this dream had to do with an old type of flea market or rummage shop. It had different levels to it, and the second level was where I always wanted to visit. This is where they had electronics, but mostly vinyl records. It had the feel of a rustic kind of place because the merchandise was all on metal shelves that were held up by trusses, like how the old supermarkets used to be. This place was dusty too, but you didn't mind because you found a lot of things there every time you went there. The seller's counter always faced in front of the shelves, and you would pay him for whatever you found. Makes sense because he could watch everyone if his counter was facing all the merchandise. The lighting in this place was like the warehouse, very poor. The seller's cash register and counter was always lit enough that you could find it whenever you were ready to buy. I remember that every time you went in, there was a ground level and you had to walk up some stairs, and then you'd feel a breeze from a kind of attic fan, but it was mounted on the side of a window to pull in circulated air from outside. Then you turned to your right and there was a screen mesh that bordered the seller's shop that you knew you were there. I again feel like this was a place I had worked at myself in the early 2000s. I worked for a construction company who had an upstairs warehouse for parts. It was really dilapidated and had dirt floors upstairs and downstairs, but this dream was definitely different than that. Attic fans have always scared me because we had one in our home in College Park, Georgia, and as a kid, I would look up at ours whenever it was being used and see the blades flying around. One thing that did scare me the most was the blades. You thought, as I did, that they might come loose and shred you up while you stood there. Another thought I had was that you thought you saw something or someone through those blades looking down at you. It still sends shivers up my spine to this day. Ironically, the attic fan in our old home was directly above the lamp we brought from Nova Scotia back in 1973. Maybe it was the ghost looking down at me. Who knows? That house is one place I will never forget. Sadly though, the present owners are as stuck up as you would ever find, and they won't allow anyone to see the inside of it. I believe that the ghost is still there, and I have a photograph to prove it. He appeared in our upstairs bathroom in 1998, and yet it wasn't obvious until I got the pictures back. I used an old 110 camera to photograph it, and that proved to me that he is still there after 43 years. In looking through my old photographs of the house, it is even more ironic that there are no photos of the hallway upstairs or our individual rooms. Nothing of the bedrooms or bathroom, only the dine area and kitchen and the living room. I know these are where we spent most of our time, but still our bedrooms are where we slept and enjoying listening to our music. Why wouldn't there be any photographs of them? One other dream I feel must be mentioned is about an old manufacturing plant. I remember I was there at this plant, and my job was to read books that were deteriorating there in this plant. I got the impression that these books were being destroyed, and the owner wanted to keep those books that had some importance, so I was selected to check them. If I found it interesting, I would put it aside and then go to another book. If it wasn't interesting, I would throw it on a conveyor belt and it was sent to an incinerator. I knew from this dream that I was a slave because you couldn't leave the plant ever. I got sick of the whole thing and eventually snuck out. I had to find a way of escaping and saw that trains came by on a platform above where I was. I climbed up and waited for the train to come by and jumped onto it so that I could at least have some way of getting away. It was in the dead of winter and you saw snow on the rails and on the ground around the plant. Anything was better than being a slave to a job you didn't like and you had no choice to decide if you wanted to stay and do it for. So, I left, preferring to die jumping or hope I made it. I remember thugs coming out as I escaped. This dream about a plant wasn't the same, but it was a kind of dreary place like the others. You didn't want to be there but you had to.
Так, давай этот люк закроем для дополнительной безопасности. Ну вообще да, тут как бы так. Ходик, не можешь дать? Ух, я думаю, что тут как-то так есть ветрено, там внизу мы хорошо поедем. Да, тут нормально. Да, тут уже высоко. Ну, теперь это самый, после видео прослывем полными идиотами. Ну не идиотами такими. Ну что, пойдешь сломать провод? Ну, надеемся, что все крепко. О, давай тут я сейчас сфоткаю. Стой, красиво стоит. Тут уже так повыше чуть-чуть. Да. Подписывайтесь на наш канал.